Welcome back to the Canadian Science Policy Conference. I'm your host, Rob Hislop. One of the things that's been talked about a lot here at this event is the Council of Canadian Academies report on the state of science and technology. One of the people who was, I guess, instrumental in coming up with that report joins us right now, Elliot Phillipson. Thank you very much for being here.
Pleasure.
You were the chair of the group that looked at the state of science and technology in Canada.
That's right, chair of the expert panel, which the council set up in order to undertake the assessment of the question.
The timing couldn't be better as far as this event is concerned as well, because it just came out this fall. What did you find? What is the state of science and technology in Canada?
At an overall level, we found that the state of science and technology is actually very healthy. It's growing. It's internationally competitive, and it's respected globally. Now, I should point out that our mandate was to examine science and technology in the higher education sector, the government, and the not-for-profit sectors, but not the private sector.
Okay.
There is a separate panel that is investigating industrial R&D.
Okay, and two obviously very different things.
Yes,
Yeah.
The two together will give a picture of the complete S&T and innovation system in enterprise in Canada.
So when it comes to looking at the state of science and technology, what sort of parameters did you go by?
Well, we use several different indicators. Firstly, our report is all evidence-based. And so the evidence consisted of a number of types. There were quantitative measures, such as bibliometrics, the study of the patterns of scientific publications.
Okay.
So how many does Canada produce? What share of the world's scientific publications as a whole and in each field are produced in Canada? So one is a measure of output, quantity. Another set of measurements have to do with the quality and impact. And one measure, for example, a very important one, is called the average relative citation. How frequently each paper from Canada is cited by other authors in their publications compared to the average rate of citation in that particular field.
This is where we're looking towards Canadian research as being the expert in that area.
Exactly.
Basically. Okay.
We looked also, again, sticking with bibliometrics, we looked at the top 1% of the most frequently cited papers in the world in each field, and examined of those top 1%, what fraction of them were Canadian publications.
And so what fraction is?
Well, overall, Canada ranked 6th in the world in terms of its publication of the top 1% of publications. There were a number of indicators, measurements related to bibliometrics. There were a number of measures related to opinion surveys. The most innovative, perhaps, or at least the most original, was a survey of international experts. And we selected the authors of those top 1% of the most frequently cited papers in the world in each field. So the people that wrote those papers, and we surveyed them and asked them a very simple question. In your particular field, which are the top 5 countries in the world based on the originality, the impact, and the rigor of their research? So, very clear question, and much, I think, to many Canadians' surprise, when we aggregate the results, put all the fields together, Canada ended up being ranked 4th highest in the world by these over 5,000 international experts, behind the United States, United Kingdom, and Germany.
Okay.
So for Canada,
good company.
It's good company, and if you look at the others, they're all much larger in terms of population. Canada has 0.5% of the world's population, but we produce over 4% of all the scientific papers in the world, and close to 5% of that top 1% of the most frequently cited papers. So the group of international experts obviously are very aware of what's going on in Canada.
So when you look at it, is this something that surprised you? Were you surprised at the findings?
Well, the overall finding of where we placed, I think, came as a surprise to most of us on the panel. But we also looked at it field by field, and 7 of the 22 broad fields, in 7 of them, Canada was ranked among the top 5 countries in the world by the international experts. And then we looked in each field, there are several subfields. The fields are broad. Clinical medicine, for example, is a huge field. There are about 25 different subfields within it. So we looked at a subfield by subfield level as well, and in 56 of the 176 subfields, again, Canada was ranked among the top 5 countries in the world. So that led to the conclusion, the broad one that I just gave you, which is that generally we are doing extremely well using international standards.
Right.
All of this report was looking at each field, Canada as a country, but each field relative to its international, the international field in that discipline. It wasn't comparing fields within Canada. Makes no sense to try to compare research in physics and astronomy with fine arts.
Right.
But it does make sense to compare physics and astronomy in Canada with that in every other country of the world. And that's what we did.
Were there any shortcomings that you discovered?
There were. Our mandate, as I said, did not include industrial R&D, but we did look at perhaps what you might consider the beginning of the interface between discovery research and applied R&D, and that's patents and other similar measures. And using those indicators, Canada is not as highly ranked as it is in terms of the basic discovery type of research. So although we produce over 4% of the world's scientific papers, we hold only 1.7% of the world's patents.
So is that something to be concerned about, though?
It is.
Why?
And, well, to the extent, but patents are by no means the only indication of industrial R&D, of knowledge translation and eventual application, but it is at least one measure that is universal around the world. Well, the concern, and that is what the second panel that I referred to is looking at, and that's been a finding of several recent reports, the Jenkins report being the one most frequently mentioned at this meeting, but several reports have found that when it comes to commercializing Canadian research, that we do not do as well as we do in producing knowledge. We do extremely well in producing knowledge, but in terms of applying it and commercializing it, the evidence thus far is that we have not been doing as well. However, I think it's important that we wait for this second panel to finish its work, so we will have a better idea of exactly how well or not well we are doing.
When you look at what goes on in our country, do you think that the policy is there to foster, I guess, scientific research and the patent? Like, is it there for every step of the way, or is it just there for the one? You know, is that why we're stronger when it comes to research, because that's where we put our energy?
No, I think, as in the panel yesterday that was mentioned, government has a role in all of this. To the extent that the major mandate of universities and colleges is to do the research, to discover, and, very importantly, to produce the highly qualified and skilled personnel who are going to go out into the world. That's where the real knowledge translation takes place. So governments clearly have a role in funding that discovery research. Everyone agrees that at the far end of the chain, of the spectrum, the commercialization, that's a function of the private sector. Where governments have a role, in addition to what I've mentioned, is in the interchange and the linking between those two constituencies, and in setting policies, regulations that will facilitate technology development and commercialization.
That seems to lead a little bit into one of the areas that I'm told is not focused on enough here, and that's communication between the various sectors. Is that something that you would have recognized in your study?
We did not look at that specifically, and there may be some challenges, but I personally don't think that the lack of communication has been the major problem. Perhaps in the past it was, but there is more and more good interaction, communication between the various sectors.
So that's improving.
That is improving, and scientists, I think, are learning that it's important not only to discover, but also to convey the importance of their discoveries to governments, to the media, to the public, and in terms that they can understand.
What's your opinion about an event like this, the CSPC? Do you see the benefits in it?
This is the first one that I've attended. I see the benefits, the major one being simply the opportunity to interact and to communicate with colleagues, not only in the sector that I come from, which is the higher education, but in the business sector and the government sector. In other words, I think the exchange of ideas, both in the panels and in the corridors, is so far, to me, that is the most important feature of meetings such as this. It's an opportunity to exchange ideas. It is called the Science Policy Conference, and there may well be ideas that the various sectors will take up and actually run with to develop their policies, but that remains to be seen.
Do you think that Canada needs an all-encompassing science policy, or do you think that's even possible?
Good question. I must say I thought that Bob Fessenden in yesterday's panel was probably correct when he said that we need two policies, not two isolated and unrelated, but one dealing with science, with research and development, and another one dealing with innovation, an innovation policy. Innovation includes, as a necessary element, it includes research, but research alone is not the same and is not sufficient for innovation. Innovation requires many more steps beyond discovery to bring an idea into a product that then makes it into the marketplace, or an idea into a policy that then affects social change or community programs. So I think that there is a need for some strategic policies related to them, but a single policy related to the entire operation may be too ambitious. It may be easier to manage with one for science and research and one for innovation. But that's that's still a debatable point.
Fair enough, and that's what's going on here this week. Excellent.
Exactly.
Elliot, thank you very much for your time.
Pleasure.
We've been chatting with Dr. Elliot Philipson.